Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Current and former residents of an HOA, what's your "I'll never live in an HOA again" story? We had a cookie-cutter house built. One of the color palettes we could choose from included an accent color for the doors/shutters that was a dark purple. The hubs and I are a little kooky, so we selected it. At our final walkthrough, our door and shutters are brown. I tell the general that it's wrong and show him my contract. We were the only homeowners in the subdivision that selected that color, so the HOA decided not to offer it anymore. We said fine, that puts you in breach of contract and we want to be released. A few phone calls later, my door and shutters are purple and I'm happy. We purchased the house. At least once a year, we get a nasty letter from the HOA about our unapproved door color. Every time, I sent them a copy of my contract and their bylaws stating that the colors from the builder are allowed. Not my problem you guys discontinued it after I picked it. My old house's backyard bordered an HOA community. Our house was built 30 years before the community was built, so we weren't part of it. We used to get notices about violations and fines if we didn't correct them. Never did correct them. They finally sent legal papers to repossess our house. Went to court with a tax map that showed our property not part of the HOA community. Judge dismissed their suit against us and found them guilty of harassment. We didn't get awarded much, but I made sure to break every rule of theirs I could until we moved. My daughter was a lifeguard at the pool in our community, and they weren't allowed to give out certain equipment. It was for swimming lessons. One day, the HOA president asks for equipment and my daughter says no as she was instructed. The HOA president actually says, "Do you know who I am?" Then he proceeded to call her boss. If you have to ask, "Do you know who I am?" then most likely most people don't give an S who you are. HOA lost paperwork for change of ownership when we bought our house. They sent us letters saying that there would be a lien placed on our home if we didn't pay the overdue amounts plus over $200 of late fees. I had to call them 3 times to even get someone on the phone who knew how to help me. Then I contacted escrow who said they had already not only sent all the paperwork, but turns out we had already paid the fees. Called HOA again and they were insistent that we hadn't paid or sent over paperwork. Called escrow again and requested they contact the HOA themselves to sort this out, and HOA still insisted we owed a late fee. Started losing my S until escrow said they would pay the late fee. A month later, we get a letter in the mail saying we were being fined for leaving our trash bins out longer than necessary. FHOA. Moved to Florida where every neighborhood is an HOA. Upon moving in, I felt like I had joined a sorority or fraternity and I had to endure the hazing from the HOA. The final straw was when they sent me a letter that my white mailbox was dirty. So I decided to walk down one street and took pics of mailboxes with no doors and mailboxes that were covered in mildew, and I emailed them all to the HOA. I told them not to send me any more notices until these mailboxes were up to code. I haven't received another notice in a year. I guess I passed my initiation. I was just learning to drive and parked my car too far away from the curb. Parents and neighbors didn't get along, so neighbors measured the distance from the wheels to the curb and parents got fined. Now I live in the country with pretty much no rules. We have goats and emus in our front yard. I was putting on new siding. Very obviously too, had ladders up and everything. But there was just plywood up one morning on part of my house facing the street. I got a knock on the door at 7:30 a.m. A code enforcement officer, in uniform looking vaguely like a cop, was visibly upset and acting like I'd taken a dump on the front sidewalk or something. Told me if I didn't have the siding up by the end of the day, I'd start getting fined every day. My grandparents lived in an old folks community with a zealous HOA. My grandmother had to go to the hospital cause of her many health problems. My grandfather would go with her. This happened once when I was visiting. There was a knock on the door at about 10 a.m. 2 elderly women with clipboards immediately jump into a speech about how the trash cans hadn't been brought in. I explained the situation. One of them said she was in the hospital the previous week, but still managed to bring in a trash can and handed me what looked like a ticket for $50. F that S. I work in emergency services. I've had HOA board members try telling me we couldn't idle our fire engine or park our ambulance there, as if I'd know the rules. I'm usually professional, but the second time they tried to complain about the fire engine idling, I responded along the lines of, "Go F yourself. I don't care what your bylaws say. Article 300 of Michigan Traffic Code says I can park wherever the F I want." We were there for a family with carbon monoxide poisoning, and I truly didn't give a D about anything else at that moment. We had crews up and down the road to treat and transport the entire family. I live in a neighborhood that has a $1 a month HOA because we have a shared drive with an area drain. That money goes to emptying the area drain every couple of years. The CC&Rs are very laid back / there are no rules, so I wrongfully assumed that would be the experience living here. The HOA president, the guy who schedules the area drains being emptied, is a boomer on a power trip. He is in my business about everything. I got a new furnace and he threatened to sue me because the utility company had to use the driveway. I scheduled a specialty garbage pickup with my garbage company and he called me screaming that I put garbage out in front of my house that morning. I have a retaining wall in front of my house and he came by and yelled at me for cleaning it. The list goes on and on. Total nightmare experience, and I will never live somewhere with an HOA of any kind ever again. This didn't happen to me, but several years ago, a coworker told me about how she and her husband put in a small in-ground pool in their backyard. They got all of the required permits and everything, and nobody said boo during the weeks of construction. After the pool was installed and they were getting ready to open it, the HOA sent them a letter informing them that it was in violation of the HOA rules and it had to be removed. I guess their community had a public pool at the clubhouse or something. They ended up going to court and spending thousands of dollars to fight it. In the end, they agreed to erect a high privacy fence around it so that it wouldn't be visible. How ridiculous. My go-to would have been to submit plans for the 65 amateur radio broadcast tower painted black for highway visibility against the sky with white flashing strobes for FAA safety compliance, and to make it clear that either the pool goes in or your amateur radio tower does. Hint: one of these can't be blocked by an HOA under federal law due to an FCC mandate on ham radio. I'll let you guess which one. It's totally the pool. This is what the FCC regulates. Pools. So yeah, the rule is really only applicable to reception antennas for TV, like small satellite dishes. Of course, your HOA probably doesn't know that, and if they do, just put a dish up on a pole. Don't forget the 1,000 watt flashing safety lights. I love reading contracts and agreements, so when a friend of mine told me about his HOA troubles and not letting him keep his boat behind his house, I jumped on the opportunity. After reading, sourcing, and finding a few rulings, I learned that they have very little power to enforce what they can't see from the road, which affects the property value. He took my documentation to the HOA and requested that they remove his fines. They refused, saying the agreement says nag nag nag. And after a few months, he finally paid a real estate lawyer $2,000 to go talk circles around the HOA, and they finally backed down, removed his fines, and allowed him to keep his boat. Then, out of pure spite and with my design, we built a 40-foot tall temporary structure conforming to both the HOA agreement and building code to fly a flag on a further 25-foot pole. We took it down and put it back up every 3 months for a year. You could see it from almost anywhere in the neighborhood. It was a real triumph, and it was hideous! My HOA had a coup where half the board resigned on the spot same day, and the 3 board members that were left handed management of our neighborhood over to some mega HOA corporation based out of LA. Before the handoff was complete, the chairman of the board fired everyone that worked for the HOA, including our incredibly talented accountant who, due to his experience, kept our finances so tip-top that we had a surplus of money and have never had our monthly dues raised in almost 15 years. When we, the residents, demanded an explanation, the chairman refused by quoting an article from our HOA charter, which gives the board the explicit right to manage the community however they see fit and without needed approval from the residents. He basically told us, "I don't owe any of you an explanation, so suck it." Now we are trying to overturn his decision to essentially give our neighborhood over to some HOA management group that treats its residents horribly like an landlord would a tenant. Oh, and the management group that we were given to is run by a man whose only formal education is a degree in opera. And the accountant, who has been assigned to manage my neighborhood finances, does not have a degree in finance or business. She has a degree in ballet. It is my opinion that our board was bribed into selling us to that management firm. Our community hired a lawyer, and we are in the process of reversing what our board has done. If successful, we are going to rehire everyone they terminated and change the bylaws to prevent anyone from ever being able to do this again. So yeah, that's my worst story, and it's still going on right now. Not my story, as I would never live in an HOA neighborhood. My sister bought a house in an HOA neighborhood 3 years ago. To be fair, none of us are super familiar with HOAs since none of us had ever lived in one, and my sister was told the HOA fees were just for lawn upkeep and snow removal. The realtor who showed her the house said that the HOA really didn't get involved in anything except for doing the lawns, removing snow, and trimming weeds. The whole experience has been an "I'll never live in an HOA again" story for my sister. The trouble started pretty much the second she moved in there. The first issue was the electrical not working. My dad, RIP, was a master electrician, so went over there to troubleshoot and fix the issues. He went over there working on some rewiring, and one of the HOA board came up and asked him what he was doing. My dad told her he was fixing the electric. The HOA board member had a fit about my dad having a small red toolbox out on the porch. My dad got back in her face and she went off in a huff. Second issue was my sister planting some roses. The roses were the wrong color. Only pink, white, or light peach roses were allowed. My sister had committed the cardinal sin of planting red roses. The HOA flipped out and demanded she remove them and fined her for it. Another dumb issue was a citation for her teenage, at the time, daughter loitering with a group on the front steps. Her daughter had been standing on the steps for a few moments talking with another girl and exchanging phone numbers. My sister has always been a person to do what she wants, so you can imagine this went over really poorly. She painted her door bright blue out of anger. She rips up the notices of fines and leaves them in the HOA president's mailbox. She has the house on the market and has another picked out. She is supposed to hear this week if she's approved for it or not. Thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, the likes, and the comments. See you in the next video.